In this episode, we examine the importance of causal structure when world building in the conceptual space. Welcome to the Bottom Turtle Podcast. Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Bottom Turtle Podcast. My name is Dr. Shannon Ray, and we're joined by our co-host Oyani Onimiya. How you doing, Oyani?
I'm doing okay, Shannon. What's up? How you doing? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, man. Yeah, we're recording this the day after Christmas, so, actually...
We're still high off of Christmas food and things like that.
Oh, yeah, I have leftovers. Once we're done recording, I'm going to go down and tear into them.
Yeah, but it was great.
I decided to... So Eunice made scones for breakfast yesterday.
What kind of scones?
So, jalapeno and like...
Oh, yeah. She made those before. Those are like savory, right? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
It's magic. She's
a wizard.
She's a goddamn food wizard. Yeah, she's a wizard. But, so, I just nibbled on some scones for breakfast. But when it comes dinner time,
I just nibbled on some scones for breakfast. Yeah, he's fancy like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have my pinky up the entire time. Don't judge. I don't need that. But yeah, it's nice.
Yeah,
chill day,
especially with the Christmas vibe, everyone seems to be in a good mood. So
yeah, I love the holidays, like the few days before Thanksgiving and the few days before Christmas. I don't know, they give me a really nice chill vibe.
And to me, I feel like I don't connect to the vibe as much here as I did when I was in Nigeria. Christmas is a whole vibe there.
Okay.
Like, I was just talking to my buddy Ike about this, and there's a certain celebratory vibe that is. Am I saying that wrong? Yeah, a part of my accent, guys.
Yeah, I think it's celebratory.
What is it supposed to be?
Celebratory,
Look,
I think.
You know what I mean, okay? But anyway, so I mean, and this is something that is in the air. I can't really, describe it or explain it to you if you're not, if you're not
Nigeria.
feeling it or you don't have the experience for it. But I spoke to Ike, and Ike is my best friend. He's from Nigeria as well, and we grew up together. And so he said, yeah, that here Christmas feels more commercialized than it did when I was back home. Like, back home, it's more about, the time you can spend with your friends, for example, all of the different kinds of food you're going to eat. Like, to be honest, though, I feel like it's closer to Thanksgiving here. Christmas in Nigeria is closer to Thanksgiving than, Christmas here is to Christmas in Nigeria. I think it's closer. So,
well, as a full-blown American, my Christmas vibes come from Christmas movies and shows and TV and all that stuff. Like, just
I can't stand Christmas movies.
Christmas music.
So let's not. I can't.
Oh, really?
I can't do it. And you know what's funny is every year I try, and I watch 10 minutes and I'm like, I can't do it.
See, for me, it's not necessarily that it has to be a movie about Christmas. It just has to be a movie set around Christmas. So, like Die Hard, for example, that gives me some Christmas vibes.
If that's, but I'm talking about the the stuff that Netflix starts to force down our throats from like November,
from like Hallmark and shit.
Oh my God, please!
No, I don't touch that.
I really do try every year because I feel like maybe it will put me in the Christmas spirit. But
I think that the prominent movie that is being pushed that most people are talking about these days, or at least in my circles, is Jingle Jangle with Forrest Whitaker.
I can do it.
Yeah,
I tried.
Yeah, I think you said you tried to watch it yesterday, right?
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday. I couldn't do it, man. I don't know. And it's not something specific about the story of it or anything. I think it's just how it just doesn't program me into Christmas. Like, it's not working.
Yeah,
it's just I'm not feeling the Christmas spirit from
that.
it. Just seems unnecessary, in my opinion.
Well, typically, you like to interact with stories that feel realistic. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like something like Jingle Jangle, a lot of the Christmas movies that they produce here are usually overly extra. Like, everyone's too into everybody's too.
It's like,
they need to tone it down.
Guys, you need to like tone down all of this chair. Like, it's a little too much. It's a little too much chair, but
too much holiday chair. You can't handle it.
Yeah, I don't know, and it kind of leads to the whole idea of what do you think makes a poor story?
Yeah. Like what is the things that are required to make you feel emotionally invested in the story? Yeah, and actually, I like kind of when talking with you about it, you're always focused on how things, whether it feels real. And it's not necessarily that you're talking about whether it's realistic, grounded in the rules of physics and our universe. No, it's like, is the behavior of the characters in the world consistent? Like, if I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, all right, I understand the rules of this world and I understand the characters in this world. Is the action that this character took, is that action consistent with what you'd expect given the constraints of the world? And I feel like that's like one of your main focus for whether or not you're going to get into something.
I think, was it you or something? I was talking to someone, and it almost seems like I want a movie to be like a real person getting stabbed to death and bleeding out in the middle of the streets. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying I know how I would react if someone pointed a knife at me.
Yeah.
If someone is pointing a knife at an actor and he has like this weird smirk on his face, or he's not like really freaking out, like if I can't connect, with the emotion that this person is trying to, like the state that this person's acting and movement is trying to program me into, if I'm not moving into that space, it almost seems to me like, no, man, I'll try again. Let's do this again.
Yeah. And, that aspect of wanting to feel emotionally invested in what's going on in the story and the characters, that is kind of like a toll that the creator of the movie has to pay to get people to want to pay attention to what they're trying to communicate. And that, back in the second episode when we were talking about simulations, or was that the second episode? Yeah, anyway, the high fidelity virtual reality and all that. Maybe that was the third episode. But it doesn't matter. But the high fidelity virtual reality, remember we were talking about how experience is based off of changing configuration. And so if you're hooked up to some high virtual reality machine, then the experience that you have during that machine, even when you take it off, that's still going to affect your behavior and how you act and how you program your surroundings and how you're programmed by your surroundings. And so when you're watching a movie or interacting with a story, you're going through a simulation, but it's not a high fidelity simulation. It's not like a high fidelity virtual simulation. And that simulation has to do with, I think, at least my opinion or our opinion, is it has to do with your emotional attachment. Like, am I going through, like, this character is supposed to be going through a series of events that they respond to emotionally. And am I on some journey with this character? Are my feelings being programmed such that I'm having a virtual experience?
Yeah. And I think that, that part, as well as, maintaining the consistency of the world that you have built in the story is an important distinguishing characteristic between a good movie or a good story and a bad one, to where it's not about, trying to say, I don't like this genre or whatever. I
don't like superhero movies.
Or something like, this is beyond that. This is just saying, what are the particulars of this journey you are trying to take me on with you? And am I actually going on this journey? Is it consistent enough? Can I predict the behaviors of these characters? Even if you're going to throw a plot twist in there, quote unquote.
So that's the thing about plot twists. Plot twists are fine when there have been enough hints presented throughout the story to where it would be reasonable to go, okay. It's like this data was there and I just missed it. But if you were paying attention, then you would have saw it. And so that's where the twist comes from. When the twist just occurs without the director or whoever made the movie or story setting the groundwork for it to happen, it just feels cheap. And that's what, that's what has to happen for people to be engaged in something, is they have to understand the rules of the world and the behavior of the characters such that they can constantly try to predict what's going to happen next, or they can go, what is this character going to do next, or how's this character going to get themselves out of this situation, and then they look at the and then you look at the set of constraints that have been displayed by the world of that. So you establish a world, so now you know the set of constraints that the character has access to think of a way to get themselves out of the situation, and now you're trying to figure out what's going on, and most likely the character is trying to figure out what's going on, and then now you're in a simulation. Now you're in an emotional simulation.
And I love how you use the example of when you're watching a movie, you're watching it with the intention that, okay, you're trying to predict, how would this character, based off of all the constraints and all of the experiences this character has had, the journey that you've been on with this character, how would this character respond to this event, to this situation they're in? And if there is no consistency in how you are telling this story, your audience is literally getting lost. And this kind of goes, to the Nigerian movie we're talking about. What's that movie called? Sugar Rush, where your typical caper movie. A group of friends stumble upon a huge amount of money in a house with a bunch of dead people around it. They take the money. Of course, they're gonna go buy cars and houses. A regular, story. And somewhere in the last 5 minutes of the story, some dude shows up. And he's just impervious to bullets, and people are shooting at him. He's floating off the ground, and I'm like, wait. Imagine Iron Man showing up in Steel Magnolias. just imagine.
I've never seen Steel Magnolias, but I'm
the last 5 minutes of the last 5 minutes of an episode of Grey's Anatomy, for example. Yeah. And then Iron Man just floats in. It's like, whoa.
Yep. What's going on here? And that's the thing that really sucks. Like, you could imagine someone that's taken the time to build up a character is stuck in the scene. Like, maybe they're handcuffed, and if they don't get out of this chair, like in the next 2 minutes, then their city will explode or something like that because some terrorist has laid a bomb or whatever. And then all of a sudden, they're just like, they just can move through solid matter. And now they're just the handcuffs fall off, and I just walk through the wall. And it's like, how the hell? Like, not a plot where did that come from? That's not a plot twist. That's just garbage.
That's just garbage. Yeah. And I think it's
this is a hallmark of bad writing. I don't know anyone who can. I mean, unless it's campy, unless the intention is this is a world with inconsistent rules, and we're just having fun
already, though.
Yeah, you have to build that people.
Build that. And then the last 5 minutes of the movie is when you start to say, well, by the way, guys, there's a campy, goofy comedy. It's like, wait. I thought I was watching Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah. Well, it's like you were saying, you're telling me before that you're currently writing a book with your sister. So where does she live? Is she in Nigeria?
She lives in Canada. This is my sister in
Scotland.
And she's a writer. Yeah. She actually has a book out, and I'm just going to put a plug in here for her. So the title of the book is called Brave Chris. It's a children's book. I think you can get it on Amazon.
Brave Chris?
Brave Chris. Okay. Yeah, so it's a children's book, one of those type bedtime stories. It's pretty cool. Yeah. An easy read, and it's really well designed. I really love it, and I hope people can support. We're going to put a link to the website where you can get the book, probably on the Instagram page in the next coming weeks. But anyway, so
I might pick me up a copy.
Yeah, it's a pretty good book.
But no, but yeah, I brought that up because you were saying that you guys are writing a story, kind of what and like
I was getting at.
Yeah, you write some of it and then you send
to her. Yeah, so basically, she's trying to really get back into her writing and all that. So just to encourage her, and of course, to help me kind of get more creative with my thinking sometimes, we decided to write a book where I'll write a little bit of it. I think we have it like for a week. So each person gets the book for a week. And, we, at the initial part, we decided that we're each going to introduce 4 characters. Each. So we will have to read through and then basically write stories for each other's characters based off of the constraints that have been created by the person who wrote that character up initially. So, that's essentially, we didn't really have a story. We're just going off the idea that, hey, look, we're going to create these interesting characters and they're going to do something interesting. And that's kind of what we said.
And the thing that's salient about it to what we're talking about is when you pass that back and forth, you can't just write whatever you want. Yeah. You can't just write that her character can suddenly fly now, to solve some if she writes this part where it's like, all right, I hand it back to you and they're in a precarious situation that they have to get out of. You can't just write whatever you want to get them out of it, because all of the information that has been built up to that point has placed your constraints. Just like in the last episode when you're talking about crossword puzzles. And with the crossword puzzles, if it's like I need a 5-letter word that has to do with pirates or something like that, you have been placed, this constraint has been placed on the set of words that you can choose that can go in that slot. And also, like we were saying in the previous episode, is if we think of ourselves as these computer algorithms that are programming this physical system, and oftentimes when we're trying to solve a problem, we're trying to optimize these objective functions, like we were talking about last time. And that objective function represents your constraints, and the constraints represent the space that you're navigating in. And so once you're given this story, all of that information at that point, that's your constraints that define your objective function of what you're allowed to write. Yes. And this is the constraint that every good story should have. When someone respects the journey of the character and the world that has been built, they start to lose the freedom. They actually lose degrees of freedom, because of constraints. They lose the freedom to write what they want.
And then and in the process of us writing this book, I have to go, before I write, I have to go back and read what she's written for the week that she had it. What character has she fleshed out? What are this character's motivations still consistent with, the last time I read about this character? And then we give each other critique back and forth saying, I don't think that this character who was this is suddenly going to do this. So then we walk it back. It's a very interesting back and forth process that we have when we work on this project together. But, I think what we're trying to get across here is that, respecting those constraints and how the story has been created, respecting the world that you have built for this character to exist in is a crucial part of a good story. And this ensures that the listener does not get lost. I'm so quick to say user.
Yeah, because then they know what world they're working in. And this brings me to like some of my I'm sorry, but I'm going to shit on soap operas because I'm pretty sure those are generally maligned by society as being schlocky garbage. And I think the reason why they're generally considered like lower brow storytelling, and for anyone who is a soap opera fan, I'm sorry if you don't feel that way. This is just what I think the general consensus of people are like. Soap operas
I mean, we can all agree that soap operas. You know what? I don't know. I'm not going to say
they have a purpose. They have a purpose, and so if you're enjoying it for whatever you're getting out of it, that's fine. But for me, what I don't like about it is there is constantly betrayal. So with these stories, they're trying to drum up some sort of intrigue. They're trying to something dramatic has happened. And often it seems as though the way they do that is they make characters betray each other. And so you have some character who's been going through all of this, drama with some other character, and then suddenly they just flip on a dime because that creates drama at that point, but you're creating that drama at the expense of the world that you've built up to that point. And so this is, to me, a reason why I think these things aren't well respected, because, they're stories that are designed to go on indefinitely. They're not designed to create a tight
knit world, so they have to keep expanding the degrees of freedom that they can have to play with to continue that story going on. Like it almost seems to me that,
or just subvert the previous constraints.
Because eventually it's always something that someone dies and wait, he didn't really die, he just it's like, do you just want endless possibilities? Because just doesn't program me, because I know for a fact that there has to be constraints in this world you're building. Even if we observe open world games, for example, there's still constraints as to what your character can do. Like those things are instrumental in how well we can connect to whatever intellectual property you create.
So I was talking to my friend Cash the other day, because this idea of building worlds can be connected to the causal structure. And so I was talking to my friend Cash, and he's a big Warhammer fan. And Warhammer is this tabletop game where each player has these armies. They have these figurines, and there are all these rules for how the figurines can attack, how they can move, how they have defense and all that stuff. It's basically, if you've played Dungeons and Dragons, it's like the battle system for Dungeons and Dragons, but that's all the game is. And he was trying to tell me about this thing that happened in a game he played, but of course I don't know how to play Warhammer, and so for me to grasp this one moment in the game, he had to spend like 20 minutes explaining to me, okay, when this happens then this happens, and when this happens then that happens, and all of that was him building the causal structure of that world. So when it came to him trying to explain the thing that occurred, now I have the capacity with my new knowledge to predict like the set of things that could happen, what making this decision does, what making that decision does. And so now the game has context. So now he's constructed this context that I can use to try to predict what will happen based off the rules of that game. And now I've been immersed in that world because I know the causal structure. And so a lot of this world building has to do with the causal structure of that of whatever space you're dealing with.
Yeah, and I think, like you said earlier, it goes to the causal structure of mathematics, to where, you know, when X, then Y because of Z, and that kind of really just describes, you know, one of the more, at least to me, comforting or most beautiful part about mathematics in general, to where, you know, it really just gets you to start to understand, you know, how much being able to predict the future is inherently important to us as human beings. And a lot of times, as minds, just being able to predict the future is so important that I feel like a lot more people than not take it for granted.
Well, remember in the last episode where you said something like everything's about optimizing the constraints?
Yes.
Well, in my worldview, I mean, that's the point of the podcast, is to kind of communicate our worldview. Given my experience in optimization, I think that minds are entropy optimizing algorithms, where entropy has to do with the uncertainty of associated with a distribution, or in the case that I'm using it, it's the uncertainty of a measurement outcome. And so you're trying to reduce the uncertainty of a measurement outcome. And so that's why in that episode where you said that it's like all about optimization, like that's all we do. It's like when I said that's a deeper statement than you know, what I'm trying to say is that we're entropy optimizing algorithms. We're always trying to predict the future, because if you take everything and break it down into like this like, think of like the fundamental algorithmic structure, which is when X, then Y. And then you have because of Z, where Z is the context that explains how X became Y.
Yep.
So you have when X, then Y because of Z. And one way I like to think about this is imagine there's a box. So imagine you have just a square. And then imagine on the left side of the square, like midway down, there's a line going into it. So there's like a line that is just going into the side of the square, and then on the opposite side, on the right side of the square, there's a line going out. So the one on the left side represents the input, and the one on the outside represents the output. And so, you know, X, when X, that's the input, then Y, that's the output, and then because of Z, that is the box. The box is the thing that gives the context. So like I was saying before, and when talking about Cash and Warhammer, the context is the causal structure, because you had X and then it became Y. And so this box thingy to me is like a fundamental conceptual tool for causality. And so when you think about a story, for example, then if you think about the story from beginning to end, then you can imagine, all right, I have the setting and the characters at the beginning, that's my input, and then I have the end of the story, and the character has some sort of character arc, the world has changed, you know, due to the actions of what happened in the story, and then you have this output at the end of the story. But at any given point in the story, you're going to have some interaction that occurs. And so you can, instead of looking at the whole story as a whole as being this giant box with the input and output, I can take the giant box and I can start subdividing it into these smaller and smaller occurrences of every interaction these characters are having. So I can make a larger box of input to output by subdividing a bunch of smaller linked causal structures. So I have input 1 makes output 1, and then I take output 1 and use that as the input 2, which gives out, and you string all this sequence of these causal structures together, and each one of them are giving context to how one thing becomes the other.
And this is perfect. It's a perfect way to describe that movie that we talked about earlier in the week, Locke, to where you can just see see how, you know, the causal nature of the decision that he made, and how this one thing affected this thing, and then it just spiraled and on, and you can watch him like scramble to kind of make sense of it. And every move that he made was consistent with his character.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yep, consistent with his character in the world. And remember how in the first episode of the podcast, we're making an argument for why information is the bottom turtle. And the reason why we can use this little box of input, output, when X, then Y because of Z, to kind of explain why information or information processing is the bottom turtle. Because as entropy optimizing algorithms, we're always trying to predict what the future will be given some input. And so if you're trying to do any task, whether you're trying to create a piece of art or you're trying to create a car or you're trying to program something, every one of those things start off with like, all right, you want to do the dishes, for example. Well, first I have to, I have to rinse off the dishes, and then I have to like fill the sink with water. Then I have to, it's just a series of, all right, do this and then that, do this and then that.
And then at the end of the day, you have a clean plate.
Yeah, and then at the end of the day, you have a clean plate, or you have whatever you're trying to bring into reality. And so, because we're essentially like everything we have to do has to do with something going from one state to another state, then any explanation of reality, like any context, like that, the Z, the box, any context, that explains how X became Y, any tool you use to model reality. It's going to be broken down into these little boxes. They're all going to be broken down into these little boxes. And these little boxes are like the fundamental object of causal structure. It's the fundamental object of information processing. And when you view it this way, then everything gets broke down algorithmically. When X, then Y, because of Z. You have beginning and you have end. It's like kind of like sometimes I think like you have like the alpha and then you have the omega. Like why do people treat that as being inherently so important? Well, if it is the case that we're all just information processors and you're a human from a back past and you're trying to create some sort of reality of how the world works, and if you're able to extract true data on how the world works, it should have some explanation in terms of information processing. Because what else is there?
That is just the foundation of it all. Yeah.
What else is there?
I think that it's interesting that causal nature is something that has to be respected, even when we write stories and watch movies and things like that. And and I always want to keep this in mind when I judge a movie or a story, because I understand that I might not like every movie that's out there, every genre. There's some things that I like, some things that I don't like. But for you to determine, a bad story, it's not a function of, well, maybe it's just not for you, or maybe you just don't like the genre. Like, I hear that argument a lot, but I'm like, wait, no. Do you know what a good story is? Because this is not a function of me not liking it, or not like, this is a horrible story.
Because here's the thing. If the story is essentially random noise, meaning each scene has no correlation to the inputs and outputs never have any correlation to each other, to where it's like imagine if someone constructed a movie where they say there's the set of all movies that have ever existed. And imagine that someone has a random number generator and somehow each movie that's ever existed is given some number or something like that. And so this random number generator, if it generates a number, it selects a movie. And then imagine that you want to make a 2-hour movie. And so you take this 2-hour movie and you divide it into time segments. So you take 2 hours and divide it by 10, or 2 hours and divide it by 100 or 1,000. And imagine that for each division you have, you take a random number generator and it just selects a movie at random, and then it just takes a scene from that movie at random and just throws it in there. And so now you have this 2-hour long movie, which is just a collection of randomly chosen scenes strung together. That's just noise. And so the more that somebody's story is closer to noise, where there aren't sufficient constraints to actually give context or causal structure, and it's not even like it's intentional. It's not like they're being intentionally vague. They're trying to just communicate a standard story, but it's so vague that you can't predict anything. That's bad. I'm pretty sure that's objectively bad.
And that's kind of where I was going with it. Like, you can objectively say that is a poorly written story, or really horrible, really poorly.
It's a shitty story because you need the causal structure for it to mean anything. If it's all, the thing about in information theory, when you know what random noise is, we call those maximally mixed states. Like random noise is like maximally mixed states. Those have no meaning. They have no information in them. Like if you compute the entropy of that state, it has maximum
all of the
entropy.
entropies in there.
It's just a maximally uncertain state. It has no meaning.
Yeah. And it just really just makes you understand how important being able to predict the future is to us as human beings. That sometimes we don't even know how important that is, and we kind of only relegate it to some weird realm of prophecies and some fortune telling or whatever. But no, we are constantly trying to do that in every step we take,
with everything, at every point, because everything just breaks down into a bunch of inputs and outputs, and then you just take the output and you use that as an input. And so if I want to create something, I have to know what X will become, what Y is going to be. So that's why we're trying to say in the first episode that people need to sincerely share their data, because when we start building these models of reality, the models is how we predict the future, and how we predict the future determines how well we are creating what we want. What can we bring into existence? If, for example, you have a model of reality where you want to make a sandwich, but every time it always ends with you having no sandwich and a hammer dropping on your foot, then that's just a shitty model. It's not. It can't predict. It can't predict the necessary context.
And I'm telling you, like, the moment that level of predictability drops to a significant level, we're all gonna notice. We're all gonna notice when you can't flip the light switch in your bedroom and the light doesn't come on. We're all gonna notice. Now it's like, oh wait, okay, did I pay my bill? Okay, wait, I paid my bill. Okay, the bulb was working last night when I checked it. Now you're spiraling into a whole realm of uncertainty.
Yeah. And it's the same thing when you lose something. Like, if you lose something, then that means that you don't have the necessary data structure in your system to reliably predict the uncertainty of a measurement outcome. Because if you lose something, what do you have to do? You're like, oh, I think it might be here. You go over there, you look, it's not there. And so if you start running out of ideas where you've looked everywhere that you can imagine, and now it's just like, I have no idea where to look, you have no data.
Who wants to live there?
You have no context to predict the outcome of where the thing is if you look for it. And this is one thing that this whole idea of predicting the future and causal structure, inserting like meaning to things. Well, that's not the only way that meaning is inserted. We'll talk about that in some later episodes. Meaning is relational. But anyway, that's one reason why I got into physics. Like, when I was in high school, I took physics from Mr. Schmidt, who was definitely one of those people who changed my life forever. Like, his classroom was so structured, and he was so good at creating an atmosphere for learning that it made me sit in that class. And I remember sitting there, and our classes were an hour and a half long. Like 15 minutes would go by, and I'd look up, it'd be an hour and a half. Like, holy crap. That's how in tune I was to it. But the thing that really gravitated me toward it is the explanation of, like, the simple problem of a ramp and, like, a ball or a marble rolling down a ramp. And because, with using physics, you can predict how long it will take to go down the ramp. You can predict how fast it'll be moving. You can depend on how fast it'll be rotating. You can calculate all this stuff. And so what you're basically telling me, like, oh, here's this science that predicts the future. It's like, oh, and that's the whole basis of any scientific method. A scientific method is supposed to have a theory. That theory has consequences of the theory, which can construct hypotheses. And then you test and then you use the theory to test the hypothesis, and if the theory can predict the outcome of the experiment, then we start saying that it has something to do with truth, and we start saying that the model is valid. This is how we validate models of reality.
Think that just one of the biggest takeaways that I want, anyone listening to this podcast to really just understand is the ability to predict the future based off of, data that we already have, or, the comfort that comes from, living in a society that's grounded enough to where we can predict things that will happen. It's something that we should not take for granted. We should be constantly trying our best to, offer up genuine data and try to make the system as robust as possible so that we can continue to accurately predict the future as we go along.
and create what we want. Because, say, for example, we're trying to understand some sort of political policy that we should have. Like, we're trying to figure out how to distribute funds or how to allocate resources or something like that, or what laws should be passed. If we treat everything as these games that we're trying to optimize, like we have this, we have these constraints, and we're trying to find a solution. We're trying to optimize this game. If we treat it like that, then it just becomes a matter of what reality do we want to bring into existence. Like if we can all agree on what reality we want, then we can start saying, okay, what is the input I need to bring that reality into existence? And I feel like a lot of times squabbling occurs not because people disagree with the outcome. I mean, clearly that's the case. People disagree with what the outcome should be. But I think oftentimes we all agree what the outcome is, but then we don't agree with the method to like bring out that outcome. And if we all share our data, it's just a matter of what makes that happen. This one thing will make it happen, and one thing won't make it happen. How do we find the thing that makes it happen?
Yeah. I think that this is pretty useful information that everybody should start to have as a part of their everyday life, and how they think, how they approach problems, and how they can actually understand what that causal nature really, really means, and how it applies to our day-to-day lives.
Yes, and that's the thing. We're getting toward the end, but I just want to say this is as a physicist, I'm pretty much an applied mathematician. So I'm not the one I'm not the one writing the theorems. I'm the one taking some sort of mathematical tool and then checking to see if a theorem exists, and then just using the tool. And a lot of times the thing about it is, if the theorem is wrong and the tool doesn't work, when I go to use it, it's not going to give me what I expect it to give me. I'm going to start trying to put something together, and it's not going to work. And so for me, when I'm theorizing, my world, my context is math. Math is my context. I can't just as if a character is stuck and suddenly they can't just walk through solid matter. It can't just move through solid matter. It's the same thing with mathematics, because mathematics is a causal structure. And just like with the adiabatic isometric mapping algorithm that we were talking about in the previous episode, that thing, I wrote the computer code, and what it does is it brings this abstract object, like a two-dimensional surface. It takes this abstract two-dimensional concept in the space of math, and it brings it into what is called Euclidean three space. But which is a flat three-dimensional space. But that's what we live in. Like in our day-to-day life, we're living in Euclidean three space. That's where we live. And so in this, with this mathematical structure, I write this algorithm, and the algorithm is put on a computer, which is just a physical system that's going from one state, when X, then Y, then Z. And it's just going through a sequence of those. And at the end, what it produces is a set of coordinates that represent that two-dimensional surface that I've brought into three-dimensional space. That's what the embedding is. I'm embedding it in three-dimensional space, and I can take those coordinates, put it into a 3D printer, and you can hold it in your hand.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's mathematics objectively bringing this abstract concept from the space of configuration, from the conceptual space, into reality, which is no different than if someone decided, I'm going to build me a bicycle. Yeah. And so they have to just have a series of when X, then Y, because of Z, and you follow that sequence until you take whatever bicycle you've conceptualized in your head and then bring it into reality.
Everything, like even when you create interactions on websites, for example, you have to go in and say, when the user clicks on here, I want this page to slide here. But if they're using a phone that is XYZ size, I want this page to shrink to this size. Remember, I was struggling with that program. That's all I had to do. Yeah, that's all I had to do to figure it out. It's like, just know, okay, when you do this happens. You just have to get into. I had to get comfortable working in that conceptual space of knowing, when I do X, this will happen. So if I move, if I want these two objects, for example, like maybe these two div blocks, and just imagine that websites are built with blocks of information, so to speak. Like it could be blocks of color, blocks of text. So I want to say, when
sounds like the degree of freedom.
so when I want to say, so when I have a screen of XYZ size, I want these 2 blocks to be stacked horizontally. When the screen shrinks to this size, I want these 2 blocks to be stacked vertically. And you just go on and just keep, and you have to keep all of that context in your mind as you build the website.
Yeah, all that content.
And that's kind of how you can and oh God, it's also connected. That's how you can tell a good website from a shitty one, because you can see that there's consistency. There's some structure to what they're trying to do. So if I tell the website that, hey, if a user is interacting with this website on a phone that is in portrait mode, for example, I want
in what mode?
Portrait mode. Portrait mode.
Okay.
Yeah, gotcha. I want both boxes to be stacked vertically, for example. I can't. On the next screen, it will start to look pretty crappy if on the next screen I don't keep that consistency going.
Yeah. And
it just all goes back to, storytelling and how all of these things are interconnected, because you want to keep the user as immersed in the website as possible. But once you start to go, I'm doing horizontal here, and then, I don't know, I'll just make it vertical here. I don't know, I'll just make it 45 degrees apart here. Yeah, everything is falling apart.
Well, and that's the thing is, for me, my world, my context, my constraints come from mathematics. In your world, it comes from the software that you have. So you're trying to build, whether you're designing a website or you're designing a logo or whatever it is, you're trying to bring that into reality. But, you're using the tools that you have to do that, and those tools can only do so many things. And you have to learn, like when you're using that program, you have to learn, okay, what do I have to do? What do I have to rearrange to
get this to do this?
Make the program produce this output, produce that output, given this input. And so that is your constraint. That's your world. And then you use that to bring something into existence. And essentially what we're just trying to get at is that causal structure makes your constraint, it constrains your degrees of freedom that you're working with and defines a context of a space for you to have to navigate. And you're trying to, and so when you're trying to put something together, just like if I'm trying to discover some sort of hidden MacGuffin in the space, in the cave or the space of mathematics, you're trying to find some, the perfect logo or something like that, and you're searching in this space.
The perfect combination of text to put together to sell a certain idea, to move a user into a certain space of conceptualization, to get them to think a certain way. It's all connected, man.
Yeah, because like you said in the episode, a couple episodes back, about trying to conceptualize making a plate levitate. You're trying to go, all right, it's like, you're restricted by the laws of hard reality. Yeah, the laws of physics. So you're in your hard reality, there's the laws of physics. And so you're trying to rearrange hard reality, but you can only do it up to what the laws of physics allow. So if you're trying to make a plate levitate, you can't just look at it and use it's not telepathy. What do they call
telekinesis.
That? When you can lift telekinesis. You're trying to use telekinesis to lift the thing. That doesn't exist in our world, so you simply can't do it. But you can go into your mind and you can conceptualize what, given the constraints of physics, what are the ways I can simulate that. Yeah. And so you're doing the same thing when you're writing your program. When you're working in your program, you have some idea of some art that you want to bring into existence, and then you have to sit back and you have to look at the tools that you have, and given those constraints, what do you have? What are the sequence of events? What are the causal events that you have to create to bring that into existence?
And this is even more obvious when you see some art that's part art, part optical illusion. To where the creator knows, what, if I put all of the light here and keep here dark, when someone looks at it on a cell phone, is going to look like this is blah blah blah. Like all of that is just the constraint that this person has. Okay, you know what? I have this piece of paper and I have a pencil. It's a flat surface, but I want anyone who looks at this to see a 3-dimensional ball.
Yeah.
How do I make this possible? Of course, he's not a magician. He can't just make a 2D drawing on a piece of paper come up and become a 3-dimensional ball when you look at it. But of course, the artist knows, if the light is coming from here and he hits this, and I create this ball in such a way that I shade this area and put the shadow over here. If someone looks at it from this angle, now it looks like the ball is coming off of the paper. Is it really? No.
Yep. No. Yeah. And I think, you know, that we definitely need to be wrapping this up. But I wanted to kind of tie together a few ideas from a couple of podcasts, you know, podcasts of old. And some of those ideas were like, remember in the last episode when we were talking about ourselves as these computer algorithms, and the idea of minds as being inherently composite. So when I'm interacting with you, then we are creating a composite mind because now we have a joint algorithm that is changing the configuration of our systems in a correlated way. And so now we have the new mind of Oyani and Shannon. And, you know, we were trying to also say before that mind might want to bring something into existence, and now it has these extra dynamics and this extra matter that it can configure, you know, because we have the matter of both of our systems. And so I remember how before we were talking about the ways in which you can increase your degrees of freedom, which you can increase the resolution, i.e. as you learn more language, then you increase the number of configurations you can put yourself in. But the other option was to increase the mass. Well, if now we start to accumulate more humans or more minds together, now we're increasing the mass, because if those minds are commuting, we can make a joint algorithm on the entire system. And so now we have this joint algorithm that has a goal that it wants to bring into existence, but because there's more mass, it might increase the capacity of the size of things that you can bring into existence. Because, you know, if you have every human on the planet trying to lift something, it's going to be way easier if you just have one person trying to lift it. And so this is, again, why we're trying to emphasize why we need to create a language or that people can all use fairly, like a fair language that everyone can trust is treating people fairly, so we can create this larger basically computer that can then use everyone's real data and everyone's dynamics to solve bigger and harder problems.
Yep.
And yeah, and so this kind of like ties all that together, because if we're pulling in our knowledge to create the context that we need to know how to turn X into Y, then, you know, we got it. It's just easy. It's easier to create. It's easier to create with real data, and that's why it's important that we share true data with each other. And try to have as many fair interactions as possible.
Yep. So you know, share your data with us if you guys. When you guys get.
Are we full of shit? We need to know, because we want that data. We want our models to be nice and accurate, so we can bring into reality what we want.
I think that I am such a huge supporter of that idea of what you just said, where you said, yeah, we want our data to be accurate. That's something that everybody should screech. You do not want to walk around with inaccurate data in your head. No, you don't. Because you know what? Like we were saying, the constraints of the space you're working in determines, you know, what you're capable of. You don't want to just be walking through walls, because that you're not adhering to the rules of the space you're in,
of the constraints. And so, you know, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you think you're playing one game, but you're actually playing a completely different game.
Yep.
Because then, you know, you're more likely to lose. Like, you don't want to compete with an adversary who knows exactly what game you guys are in, and you have no idea what game you're in. So that's why you need your model to be as accurate as possible.
So
so now you can make decisions to put yourself in a better position. You don't want to make
as more and more people start to think this way, it will be almost as similar as, it will be exactly the same as creating some form of hive mind, to be honest.
Oh yeah, well, we're already in a hive mind. Like we already are. Like, no one, you know, my advisor, his advisor used to always say that nobody is anybody without somebody around. Yeah, nobody is anybody without somebody around. And you know, your algorithm and how it works and how it functions, it depends on your set of interactions you've had in the past. It depends on your genetics. It depends on your parents. It depends on the inputs and outputs and how you interact with your society. There is no, like, independent self. It's just a collection of composite things, you know, that are, you know, trying to just navigate this space, essentially.
I definitely agree.
But let's end it there, man.
We're gonna end it there.
Wait, I'll let you have the final thought, and then actually have your final thought, do the plug, and we're out.
Yeah, so we're gonna end it there. I think my final thoughts, I will say, is, you know, there is definitely a way to determine what a shitty story is and what a good story is. I will just put that out there. This is not a function of, oh, well, maybe it's just not for you, whatever. Yeah, it's not that hard to start to pick apart what makes a movie a bad movie and what makes it a good movie. It's more often than not, it's not only based off of, how you feel or whatever. Like, there's just some objective rules that should be followed as with everything else in life. And if you are missing these fundamentals, you obviously do not know what it takes to write a good story or anything like that. And you're completely lost in the sauce.
I love it.
At the end of the day, hey, like we said, we want your data, so let us know. You can hit us up on social media. We are on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at the Bottom Tartar Podcast. You can also catch us on Reddit now. We have a subreddit. It is called the Bottom Tartar subreddit, and it's pretty great on there. We're going to be posting more content more often now. Yeah. So we're working on that, and we are really hoping that we can interact with you guys. So please hit us up on social media. We want to know your thoughts, what you think about, what we say, if you agree, if you disagree, and what you want us to talk about. I think we should talk about conspiracy theories in the next episode. I think that would be fun.
You think so?
I think we'll do it.
Yeah, we'll do it.
But yeah, we'll catch you guys same time, 2 weeks. Every other week we put new episodes out on Spotify and Apple Podcast and wherever else.
And do not forget to subscribe, share with your friends, write a review, and rate the podcast. That all helps us a lot. If you are resonating with this podcast and you think that it has good ideas that you want to share, please share them with people and help us grow. We really appreciate it.
And we'll see you guys next time. Stay turtling.
All right, peace. Oh, stay turtling, my friends. Peace.